And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fabulous Life Masterclass with Dr. J. And my special guest tonight is Mr. Socrates Garrett. Welcome. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for having me, Dr. J.
No problem. I'm sorry for interrupting your dinner.
That's okay. That's okay. We got to get it all done.
No problem. No problem. So I want you to start off by telling us who is Socrates Garrett? Tell us where you grew up. Just walk us through your story.
Wow. Uh, I grew up in Madison County, uh, suburbs of Canton, Mississippi, a little community called Farm Haven. And, I grew up at a time, I was born in 1946. And I grew up at a time when racial prejudice and discrimination and injustice was just running rampant in Mississippi. But I grew up in a community where Black folk own their own land. So when you own your own land, it brings about a different set of dynamics. Because I never worked for anybody other than my father. And he never worked for anyone other than his father. So although we grew up at a time that racial discrimination was running rampant, I never saw any white people.
Wow.
They didn't come in our communities. And the first time that I encountered white folk in Mississippi, it was not good. But the tragedy came from outside of the community that I was in. So I was 10 years old when Emmett Till was killed. And Emmett Till was killed, and that put a chill on the entire Black experience because we didn't know exactly how to handle that, how to react to that. And a couple of years later, after that experience, I lost two of my cousins that were killed coming out of Kosciuszko, Mississippi, and they were run over on the Natchez Trace. And after having been run over, they were castrated.
Oh, wow.
So my father took me to the Natchez Trace to see the spot that they were killed, murdered in. And let me get my little helper here to not make so much noise. Carol, I need it quiet. I can hear all them pants. And so we went up and rode up there and we looked at that greasy spot in the middle of the highway. And it was a real ugly situation. A couple of years later after that, my uncle was driving a school bus and he attempted to pass white kids on a school bus. And so he passed them and then he was intercepted and opened the door to the bus and they shot his fingers off his hand. They were trying to shoot his head off. He threw his hand up in front of his face and shot his fingers off his hand and shot one of his eyes out. And it was not unusual to have, crosses burning and things of that nature at this point. And my mother decided that she would send all of her children out of Madison County, Mississippi, and send them to Pineywood School, a boarding school. It was the only choice that she had to save her children. And so we all left Farm Haven, Mississippi, and I left there in 59. And so at 14, 15 years old, and I never came back home because I was at Piney Woods, and I came there running from white folk. And when I got to Piney Woods, all of my instructors were white. They were PhDs and doctors like yourself. And they had volunteered their time and their education to come to Mississippi and teach at Piney Woods School. And so I got a different nurturing at 14, 15 years old from the one that I had experienced in Farm Haven, Mississippi. And so that mixed background is somewhat confusing. And today I have mixed emotions about, what's good and bad about America and who's good and who's bad. And so that was the beginning of my training and nurturing under Lawrence C. Jones, who started Pineywood School with a student and a log and a book. Came into Mississippi out of Ohio in the middle of the riots and the racism, and started a school in Simpson County, which is Goon Jones territory, one of the worst counties in Mississippi at that time. He was able to start a school, and he taught us, and he spoke to us, and we walked with him at Pineywood School, and I got a good education. I got a better education than most would have gotten in Mississippi in the public schools. And then I left Alcorn, I left Piney Woods, and I went to Alcorn State University, where once again I ran into Dr. Boyd, a strong African-American male leader. And he ran Alcorn. And so I didn't really ever participate in anything with white folk. I came out of Farm Haven where I didn't see them. And then I went into Piney Woods, and I was under Lawrence Jones. And then I went into Alcorn, I was under Dr. Boyd. And then I graduated from Alcorn, and I left Mississippi fast as I could. And I went into Los Angeles and started my work career out there. And so that's kind of my upbringing. My father was a real advocate for social justice, and Charles Edwards and Aaron Henry and Martin Luther and everybody stayed at the house when they came through that way, Stokely Carmichael. But we had been sent away. And so, I didn't gain that experience like a lot of people did, and pay the price that a lot of people did with marching and getting beat up and things of that nature. Kind of got sheltered around that a bit. So that's my that's where I come from, and that brings me up to graduating from college. So then the real story begins. I don't want to go on and on, so you let me know what else.
No, I'm just enjoying. I know everybody else enjoying too. So you can tell us about, after leaving Alcorn, you went to LA.
Yeah.
How long were you in LA?
Well, I went out there in 68, and interestingly enough, I went out to Los Angeles in 68, and my first job was with a black man that had a fabricating company in Watts. And, I was drawn to, black strong leadership. And so once again, I didn't deal with folk other than black people and nurturing and who I was. And he made me vice president of the company, and I was just getting there. And so, but I had a college education and was doing good. So Stayed out there with him. And then one day I got a letter from the Army. It said that I had been drafted in 1969 to go to the Army. And I didn't go to the Army when I was drafted, Dr. J. I didn't go. And so one night they kicked the door down on my apartment, and they took me to the Army and told me that I was AWOL because I had been drafted 2 weeks ago and I had not shown up. So I went in the Army. I was really drafted. Not only was I was drafted, they came get me. So I did. I went in the Army, and I was a strong Black independent man, and so I wasn't doing very well at the soldiering thing and taking orders from people. And so I did make PFC and as private first class. And then one day I had a master sergeant who decided that he wanted me to pick up cigarette butts out of the latrine and off of the grounds. And I said to him, I don't think I'm going to pick up any cigarette butts. I said, furthermore, I think you're the real problem that we're having here. He was Japanese. I said, you're the problem that we're having now. You're going to tell me to pick up cigarette butts? I said, that's not happening. And so that was a mistake, because immediately they took all of my little stripes away, and I was making $115 a month. That's all they paid me. And they took my little stripes away and busted me all the way back down. I didn't have nothing on my sleeve on my Army jacket. And my pay went down to $85 a month. And that wasn't very good. So, but I enjoyed my time in the Army, and I made rank, got out as sergeant, and I was in finance there, and I left the Army in 71. Now, all of this time, I was in the Army. They didn't know exactly what to do with me. When I came out of basic training, which everybody goes to basic training, but when I came out of basic training, I didn't have any orders. And so they didn't know what to do with me. So they said, you're going to infantry training, advanced infantry training. Now, everybody goes to advanced infantry training, is on their way to Vietnam. So I went to advanced infantry training and learned all the skills on how to kill and how to avoid from being killed. And when I got out of advanced infantry training, instead of going to Vietnam, they sent me to Fort Lewis, Washington. Because I had that college degree and because I was a business major in finance background, they put me in finance in the Army. And I stayed at Fort Lewis, Washington for the duration of my time. And I got out of the Army in 1971, and I resumed my career in Los Angeles. And so I had a job, and I didn't do well on the job. Again, none of my parents had ever had one. And so I had a desire to work for myself. So I came home to Mississippi. I joined Xerox Corporation, and I started selling copy machines for them in 1973. And I did that for years and moved up through that rank pretty good. I was branch sales manager when I left there, and I had all offices in 5 states, $60 million budget, 150 salespeople, employees, and I got great training out of Xerox. Went to their regional schools in Dallas, went up to Leesburg, Virginia, and got the best training you could get. And then when I got all of that training, I decided I better go in business for myself, which is what I was bred to do in the first place. So I went in business for myself in 1980 and started my own business, manufacturing industrial chemicals right here in Jackson, Mississippi. And I've been in business for myself since 1980. I've made a payroll now for 40 years, every week So if you take 40 years times 52, I've made a payroll now for 2,080 consecutive weeks, and not one week has anyone not been paid during the most difficult times, and that's amazing. I don't know how I did that.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how I was able to do that. I do know that God had His hands in what I was doing, and He had His hands on my life because He brought me through some difficult times from the upbringing standpoint. Didn't send me into Vietnam where I could get maimed and slaughtered and shot up, and brought me back into Mississippi to do some work, some good work, and we've been doing that ever since. So when I started out in 1980, trying to sell chemicals to the city of Jackson, I realized that Black folks wasn't doing any business in Jackson, Mississippi. And they wasn't doing any business anywhere else in the state of Mississippi. And nobody would listen to us. And so I started a publication dedicated to trying to be the voice of the Black community and try and bring to the forefront the fact that African American business people are being mistreated in 1980. So me and Roy Dixon and Matt Thomas and my godfather Nolan Tate, Lord, I miss him, uh, band together, and we started a publication called Today's Mississippi. And that led into struggles and the fights, and I kept trying to get folk to do business with us in this community, and they never would do it. And so I started another publication called Today's Mississippi, Tomorrow's South, with Chuck Williams and Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker's a great businessman, deceased now, but Chuck's still here. And so I was still fighting, trying to get access to do business in this community. And so I ran into another strong Black male that took me under his wings, Robert Clark. Robert Clark was a scientist, but he also was a god in the Muslims, and he helped bring fish into the Bay Area. And I have pictures of him with machine guns on and bullets strapped across his chest. A soldier, a real trained soldier. And he took me on his wings and he started to teach me about the discipline of being able to survive and how I had to fight. So one day I told him I had to move from my apartment and I couldn't come to work with him that day. It was going to take me all day to move. And he said, any man that can't move within 2 hours has made a serious mistake. You should not have acquired that much stuff that keeps you from being able to move in 2 hours and be completely gone. And I kind of understood what he was saying, because clearly there would be people looking for you doing what I was trying to do. But he taught me, trained me. He had me selling apples and oranges on the corner on Mill Street. Here I am, a college degree guy, having run a $60 million enterprise at Xerox. Now I'm selling apples and oranges in a basket at Mill Street with Robert Clark. Said I had to get to know my community. So I had those kind of experiences. I miss Robert. I miss his teaching and his training. He taught a lot of people. And I continued on in business and started to make some inroads and started to build a business. And in 1987, in the chemical manufacturing company, I had borrowed $250,000 from a Mesbic in New York City from International Paper Company. Now, a Mesbic was a Martin Hardy Enterprise uh, funding source that the government had funded. By the government told them that if for every dollar they put in, the government would match their dollars if they would lend some money to small African American owned businesses. So they came down here and they loaned me $250,000, and I could not make that business go. The business wouldn't go broke. It wouldn't die. It just wouldn't grow. And so I was struggling to make ends meet. But like I said, I always make payroll. And so when I spoke to James Meredith one day, and I said to James Meredith, I said, James, I owe International Paper Company a lot of money, but they don't ever bother me about paying them. So I'm just going to keep struggling forward, trying to do what I'm trying to do. And he said to me something really striking. He said, they're never going to say anything to you, Socrates. He said, because they got you exactly where they want you. Because you will never be able to do anything. Because the day that you start to be successful at something, that's when they're going to show up. They're going to set you back and take you all the way back down again. And I said, well, what should I do? He said, start over completely. My granddaddy used to say, when a crop in the field, if the grass overtook it, he wouldn't let us try to chop the grass out of it. He said, plow it on and start over. And that's what James said. So the next day, I went down to the bankruptcy court, and I told the judge down there that I was filing bankruptcy. And he said, well, what do you owe? I said, oh, $750,000 in total. He said, well, what's your assets? I said, I got about $50,000 in assets. He said to me, he said, well, how in the world did anybody get that much indebtedness with so few assets? And I said to him, I said, well, it happened because I had a great plan. The business model was good. I said, everybody knew I was hardworking. Everybody knew I wouldn't quit. And so it wasn't me that I didn't understand that I didn't factor in the racism and discrimination and the plight of a Black man in my business model. Because when I was with Xerox Corporation, I was the #1 marketing guy in the country. I mean, I was very, very good. Spent a lot of time in Hawaii and Bermuda because of my sales aptitude. But when I went in business for myself, I couldn't sell a thing. Nobody would buy nothing. And so I didn't factor that in. I didn't know the extent of systemic racism and discrimination and how it worked. But I learned, and I had to overcome that. In spite of that, I had to build a business in a state that was the poorest state in the nation as an African American that was being treated worse than African Americans were being treated anywhere else in the world. And in 1980, the interest rates were 23%. 23%. And I had to overcome that to be successful in business. I kept working, and God kept encouraging me, and my mother kept encouraging me, and my father kept encouraging me, and my family kept encouraging me and said, go for it, you can do it, you can do it. And I remember back in the cotton field, growing up as a little boy, when an airplane would fly overhead. It's in Madison County, Mississippi in 1955. My auntie would say, "There goes Socrates flying that plane." I didn't know what a plane was, hardly. But she looked at it and she looked at me and she said, "You're going to fly that plane one day." And that stayed with me. I have that kind of dogged determination that drives me today. No matter what the obstacles, no matter who's hating, I'm going to keep fighting it. And so I began to overcome some of these things and build a successful business. And so in 1995, I had my first contract after struggling with Russell Davis, Dale Danks, Kane Ditto. I finally was able to break through and get a contract to supply some chemicals to the operator of the wastewater treatment plant. So in 1995, I expanded that model because I was making chemicals. In 1995, I expanded that model where I could farm, I could actually run the wastewater treatment plant. And I had the contract to run the wastewater treatment plant at Presidential Hills. And then I got a contract to run the dewatering plant down at Savannah Street. And then I expanded that contract to do all the transporting of biosolids to various farms throughout the county. And then I expanded that contract to do the land incorporation. So I bought tractors and spreaders and this and hired a lot of Black people. At this point, I'm employing about 95 to 100 African Americans in Jackson, Mississippi. And I did a lot of good work, trained a lot of people, bought a lot of equipment, and put a lot of Black folk to work. I had 7 or 8 people making over $100,000 a year working for me in 2000, 2005. And I continued to build on that model. Now, during this time, Maynard Jackson had shown the world how serious he was about Blacks in business. And he said to his contractors at the airport in Atlanta that if they wanted to do any work in Atlanta under his guidance and his mayoral time, that they were going to do 25% of all their work with African Americans. And he meant that. And Atlanta boomed, and the Black business community was created, and it skyrocketed, and you got some major players over there that Maynard created. Well, the move was on. Harold Washington was doing the same thing. The brother in Cleveland, Ohio, was doing the same thing. Black males before be included in the process. Harvey Johnson as mayor in the city of Jackson, and Harvey had Maynard to speak at his inauguration. So he was a student of Maynard. And Harvey continued the program, and Harvey began to do business with Black folk at a level and a rate that we had not seen before. But because I had been there since 1980, I was entrenched, so I knew when we got a Black mayor and finally the playing field would be level, that I would do extremely well. And I did. Harvey was good for the Black business community. And so I eventually acquired 35% ownership in the company that was running the wastewater treatment plant. Severn Trent out of London, England, And I, Garrett Enterprises, created a company called JWP, the Jackson Water Partnership. And I own 35% of that business. Now, at this point, I'm the only African-American owned business that's running a major wastewater treatment plant in the country, right here out of Jackson, Mississippi. And Harvey increased the participation in his EBO plan. And so there was no limit to what I was going to be able to do in business. And so I thought that we had really overcome, and that if I own 35% of that kind of a company, and I hired that many African Americans, that one day I would be right there with, remembered like Marcus Garvey. One day that I would be spoke of in the same vein of my friend that ran Reggie Lewis, that ran Beatrice Food. I was talking to Earl Graves on a regular basis, and he came to Mississippi to do articles. And so I was almost in mainstream. And then the political climate in Mississippi changed. Harvey lost the election. And I'm gonna tell you, he was the best mayor we ever had, black or white. And I don't say that because of what he did with the EBO program. I say that because of his character. He was an alpha male to Barack Obama. He was honest. He was charismatic. He wouldn't allow you to buy him a cup of coffee. You could go to lunch with him, but he was gonna buy his own meal. You weren't gonna spend a dime on him. And that's why you never heard his name brought up in any foolishness. He was highly respected, became vice president, I believe, or maybe even president of the U.S. Mayors Association, recognized all over the world as a real leader. He was trained. He was captain in the Air Force and then ran Mississippi Small Town Institute, degreed in planning and urban planning. So he was trained for what he was doing. But for whatever reason, our citizens decided that he wasn't the right man for the job. And then we elected Frank Melton. And Frank was a character, all right. Frank didn't tear the program down. He didn't emphasize it. He just was focused on being a police person. And as long as he was dealing with the police department, he didn't care much about what was going on everywhere else. And so, but he was such a different person and did so many unorthodox things until the community had to relieve him of his responsibilities and re-elected Harvey. And so that's the way things were going. And so then my business was still solid. I was still growing, employing, and hiring a lot of people. And then Mayor Chokwe Lumumba decided he was going to run for mayor. And he was going to usher in a new concept of, I'm not exactly sure what it was, but you know, it was called the Kush Plan. Basically, he advocated that blacks have their own land and their own government and be self-determinant, which, you know, I agree that blacks ought to be, and I've always been a person who realized that my destiny is in my own hands. So I agree with that concept. But it was interesting how that concept was going to come into a municipal leadership position. So Chokeway decided that the model that had worked, blacks that had been successful were part of the problem, and that we ought to have a cooperative model where all the black folk own things together, a co-op concept. And so, because I was successful with the model that was there, I became a target, someone that the community had to stop, had to destroy. And so they set the wheels in motion to take everything that I had away. And contract after contract after contract, black folks voted to take it away. And it got to be so, even after Chokeway, with the next mayor, Tony Yarber, because I supported Tony Yarber for mayor, I became marked by the Black City Council. Because at that time, Priester ran for mayor, he was a council member. Margaret Barron ran for mayor, she was a council member. Chokeway ran for, mayor. I mean, Lil Chokeway was taking his daddy's spot. And so I supported Yarber. I had to support Yarber because the way things were going, I wouldn't get any business under that leadership. So when Yarber won, then the white community and the black community, business community and politicians decided that they needed to put the skids on what I was doing. And so there was a contract out for hauling biosolids away from a stockpile at the landfill. And I teamed with a company called Denali. And Denali had done this kind of work forever. And Priester and Tyrone Hendricks, Tillman, decided that they didn't want me to have that contract. And they eventually took it and awarded it to a white-owned company out of Philadelphia, Mississippi. The same city where we had the murder of Cheney and Shriner and Goodman. But black folk can hate so hard and try to tear you down so much until they'll team up with Beckwith. They'll team up with anybody. And that's what happened. And then the Jackson Free Press chimed in and said that I was a big campaign contributor to Yarber. So they attempted to tear me down. And then the white Republicans jumped on with their white attorneys over there. Wilson Carroll, he made up a lot of lies and tried to tear me down. And so they were eventually successful. They took everything that I had and they ran Yarber out of office. Yarber might have helped his situation a little bit, but anyway, he was gone. So then I was standing there and I realized that I had to remake myself. I had to go back to the beginning and reinvent myself and create a new business model. And I said that this business model that I'm going to create this time, because just as a footnote, Dr. J, when I left that bankruptcy court, 5 years after that, I was a millionaire.
Oh, wow.
And I say that so that Black folk will understand that bankruptcy is an offensive strategy, not something to be ashamed of and something to be afraid of. It's why it was created in this country. There are no debtors' prison in America. Because in the capitalistic economy and this government, formal government, we want risk takers to take risks. And you know what you know now, start over and try it again. So you can do that. So you can reinvent yourself and you can come back again. And so I was able to do that. So this time I knew I had to create a new business model. So one of the things I decided I would do in that model is that I would never be in a position where 4 or 5 Negroes could determine my future. That I must diversify my business model into mainstream, into the general population, so that won't happen. When I came up through Maynard and Harvey, Black business people were running to Black elected officials. Today, we're running from Black elected officials. And so I had to create a new model. And then God touched me once again and put another person in my path. And that individual came to me and said that you can let them treat you this way, or you can fight back, and I'll help you. But I'm going to help you by taking you out of this market. He said, any man that can accomplish what you accomplished in Mississippi, if you were anywhere else in the world, you would be recognized as one of the great businessmen of all time. Put you in Seattle, and you would be a BE 100, top of that list. So we got to get out of here. And so he took me into Puerto Rico, in Houston, Atlanta, the Virgin Islands. I got contracts in every one of those provinces, cities, and states.
Wow.
Contracts in South Carolina, at Cherry Point, in Tri-Command, North Carolina. I began to work all around this country. I ran into real serious CEOs, millionaires that says, let's work together on some things. And so I realize now, my pastor told me, he said, you've been successful, but it's time God want to make you be significant.
Oh, wow.
And so I realized that things were happening to me fast in a way that I couldn't possibly create myself, not these people, not these relationships. And so I even moved to a position where I acquired a company in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And acquired coffee roasting businesses in China. And I'm embarking upon some tremendously high-tech, brand new technology, exciting things to bring into this marketplace that's going to revolutionize the way Black folks are looked upon and the way they do business. And so that's kind of where I am today. I stay involved as an advocate because I don't want any Black person to go through what I've been through in business. I want to keep working. Started an organization called Business and Ministerial Alliance, because I know that if business people and preachers ever come together, the community will win. I know that. And ministers and business people have to get the message across to these politicians that politicians work for us. We're not down there begging and grappling trying to get them to do the right thing while they remain upset about somebody they don't like for some frivolous reason, or he didn't support my campaign, or he doesn't like me, or he voted for something that they don't believe in. We got to make all that go away. Black business people have to take their rightful position in this community, just like white business people do. White business people run the white community. They select the politicians to carry out the agenda that they set forth. Black politicians think they create the agenda, think they craft the agenda. And unfortunately, we create that ourselves by the honorable this and the honorable that. Because you got elected to be a city council person that pays $300 a week. You now the honorable this or the honorable that. Give me a break. You're down there to carry out the agenda of the community, and the community needs a strong business class to hire its people. Black folk hire more black folk. Black business people hire more black folk than any other organization other than the federal government. That's who hires our people. That's who train our people. So everybody that comes in my business and comes into my life, into my wheelhouse, know that they are there to be trained so that one day they can open their own business, they can go forward, and they can control their own destiny, and they can hire other black people, and they can be role models, and they can be something for our children to see, because our children can't be what they have not seen. If that lady had not said that was me flying that airplane, I would have never thought I could have been an airplane pilot. So we have to create that environment for our children. I'm involved in doing that. I'm going to do that for all the time I got left here on this earth. And I'm going to do that more aggressively than I've ever done it before. And I'm going to do it more aggressively than I've ever done it before because we've lost ground. So I can't stop. If the generation behind me had picked up with the baton and moved it beyond where Harvey had it and created a strong business class and made certain that African Americans are the recipient of their own tax dollars that they spend, we get less than 2% of contracts for goods and services with the state of Mississippi and less than 10% of contracts for goods and service in the city of Jackson. And yet we pay all our taxes in there. At least give us the opportunity to procure and work with the dollars we send those back. And so I'm going to work the rest of my life to make that happen so that my kids' standard of living can be equal to mainstream America. We want the same thing white folk want. Good schools, good homes to live in, good streets to ride on. We want the same thing. And we're going to work to make sure that we do our part to make that happen. I've talked enough, Dr. J, so I'm gonna be quiet now.
No, that was good. That was some good information. We have a question from Miss Barbara Howard. What advice could you give to a Black middle-aged female aspiring to be a business owner?
Well, the first advice I would give is that you got to start now. If you're middle-aged, you got to get going, because you have to have time to make mistakes and recover from it. So my advice is let's get started right away. Get you a good business plan, a good model, and you get that from what you've seen. You know, you train with somebody in the field that you want to go in, volunteer your time over there, work with them, look and see how they do that. And then the jump off point becomes very clear. You don't go into business until you have a customer. When you got a customer, It's time to leave and start your own business. Because black folk don't have 5 years to turn a business around like white folk. You got to be profitable from almost day one. And the only way you can do that is to have a customer when you start.
Wow, wow, wow. You are so full of knowledge. I mean, I can sit here and just listen to you talk for hours and hours. There's so much good information. And
Yeah.
so we only have about 10 minutes left, but I do want you to mention the work that SRS and SGE are doing with
Yeah.
COVID-19.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said earlier, we're involved in some technology companies now that are really going to redefine how business is done in our core industries. So SRS is a minority-owned company, first of all, out of Nashville, Tennessee, that has acquired the rights to patented equipment that will actually test your facilities to see if the COVID-19 virus is present. So they have the ability to go into a building, into a sanctuary, into a school, and run analysis. And within 90 minutes, they can tell the owners whether or not that virus is in that facility, the first of its kind. And so that technology, SGE, is a subscriber, subcontractor to SRS. So we have access to that technology. And it will be rolled out very shortly. To go along with that, we developed facial recognition technology that will, when you approach the door, entrance to a building, it will identify you with facial recognition, and it will take your temperature at that door and tell you exactly if you over 100 plus 1 degrees, it will reject your interest. It will also state that you don't have on a mask, entry denied. And so that contact tracing, and if we're on a college campus and a student approaches that camera, that tablet, and their temperature is high, it will send that information to the nursery or wherever the university or the school system says it needs to go to. And so that's, groundbreaking technology that we have here in the minority business community that's coming to the marketplace. And two final parts of that business model is that the major companies have come together and created a completely safe disinfectant product that kills COVID-19. And they have the white papers to support that. And we're going to be showing that information and bringing those people to town so they can present all of this to the greater community. But they have a product called Pro Guardian that is completely safe, 100% biodegradable. The amazing part about that, a lot of people have products that will kill COVID-19. Sodium hypochlorite, bleach will kill COVID-19. But you can't put it on yourself, on your clothes, and you can't be in the environment with it. And so this product is safe to use. It's 100% biodegradable, and within 2 hours or so, it's completely gone. So SRS and SGE will be introducing this technology and this product into the marketplace during the month of July. And the final part of that is a protocol on how you clean properties. It's impossible to clean the building the way we've always done, by wiping and rubbing and on surfaces. All we're doing in that case now is spreading the virus more than killing it. And so we're going to train janitorial staffs in every institution that will hire us. We'll give them a protocol on how they should clean, how they should use foggers, when they should use these various approaches, and we're going to certify that they've been trained. And so, if an outbreak or something like that happens, then a quarantine, people need to be quarantined at that point. We will come back to that business and work with them to try and get a handle on that situation. So this technology and this business model is going to really assist in the way we fight COVID-19. That's one business model that is coming here very, very shortly, Dr. J.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I guess as a final thought, give encouraging words to the young people out there who may be thinking about going into business for themselves, and they probably thinking of every excuse not to. What would you tell them?
Well, I tell them to get started early. I tell them not to run away from their heritage. If their mother and father worked in a business and struggled with it for years, even though it may not be doing what you want it to do right now, it's still a head start. That infrastructure is still in place. If you're second generation, third generation, I realize you got a good education now, et cetera, but jobs are not transferable. Businesses are. They survive generations. So I tell young people to take that good education that you got and go into business for yourself. It's the only truly rewarding career, because at the end of the day, it depends upon you. It depends upon whether or not you figure it out, whether or not you overcome whatever obstacle it was, and when. And our young people are talented. And quite frankly, I just want to apologize to them for some of the things that they're having to deal with today.
Wow.
My generation, my father's generation, your father, Dr. J, they fought. They fought to the end. They fought bloody battles. They shed. They got dogs put on them. They fought till we got the 1964 Voting Rights Act, and we changed a lot of things in the country, and they brought in affirmative action where we could get these jobs. We got those jobs, and then we went to sleep. And so now the generation that we have, when they had the march last Saturday, 25 and under is what they claim. But I was there. I marched with them. I was the oldest marcher down there. And I had to apologize to them, because they should not have to deal with George Floyd. We should have solved that and fixed that after Emmett Till. That should have been over with. My kids shouldn't have to go through that. So we didn't get that done. So what I'm encouraging them to do now is to fight the fight, take the fight that they're taking, and they are taking the fight. They are taking it all over this country. And I'm very proud of them. But then they gotta come back and they gotta control their own communities. And they gotta realize that the last vestige of freedom is in economic justice. I mean, inroads have been made everywhere else. But when I tell you, you get less than 2% of contracts for goods and services out of the state of Mississippi, you make no inroads there. And so economic justice is where they got to focus on. And that's what Martin has started to focus on as well. Does you no good to be able to buy a hamburger from anywhere you want to if you don't have no money to buy it? Well, you can't do it. And the main source of crime in our community is poverty. And we got to eradicate poverty. And we do that with economic justice and business development. So I tell young people, stay strong. Start early, pick up from where your parents left, get a good education, get trained well, then leave those jobs and start your own business.
Wow. Powerful, powerful, especially the apology. I don't think I've heard that in a very long time. And so I just want to thank you for just saying those words because the ball was dropped. I think after the civil rights movement, people got comfortable. They started making a little money and they just got comfortable. So thank you for apologizing. And thank you for being on the Fabulous Life Masterclass. You were an awesome guest. And so, again, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much.
All righty.
All
So we
right.
will see you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.